Hey guys, this is Chad Giudice, and you're listening to The Art of Suffering. Our mess becomes God's message. Although the prophet Jeremiah's life predates Christ, he was no stranger to suffering, or the weight that would one day be that of the cross of Jesus Christ on Calvary. As a devout Jew, he witnessed the fall of the temple built by King Solomon and the beginning of the Jewish exile that anticipated the coming of the Messiah. Despite his despair, the God of Israel spoke to him these prophetic words about his people and their nation. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, plans for your welfare and for woe, so to give you a future of hope. Growing up, my dad played a unique role in my life that many other fathers at that time and now presently don't. After surviving a heart attack in his early 30s and losing his job during an economic crisis in the 1980s, he worked from home, and he was a constant in my life. His witness to bear any burden and in humility request the aid of family, all for my benefit to his own detriment, taught me that no matter what life throws your way, as a father, you never abandon your children. Well, the culture we live in has changed drastically since I was a kid. A recent Pew Research poll from 2019 shows that a quarter of U.S. children under the age of 18 live with one parent and no other adult. That's more than 3 times the share of other children in that same demographic around the world. 1 in every 3 American children today are growing up in a home without their biological father. And this has had a dramatic impact on the social stability of our country. That ranges from higher incarceration rates, behavioral issues, increased rates of poverty, and lower rates of higher education. Someone born into these circumstances surely has more challenging path before them than other people. And this reveals an ugly truth about life. It's just not fair. Jesus Christ came to reveal God as Father. And in the book of Romans, St. Paul says that through the power of baptism in the new covenant, we do not receive a spirit of fear or fall back into slavery, but rather a spirit of adoption, to cry out, Abba, Father. My guest today has defied all of these odds, including never knowing his own biological father. Growing up in Southwest Louisiana, amidst the lingering effects of racism as a biracial man post-civil rights movement, and fighting the subconscious lie that because he was unplanned, he wasn't wanted. Through the grace of God, instead of becoming another statistic, he has courageously allowed God, the Father, to transform him into the person he is today, not in spite of those circumstances, but because I've gotten to know him, I believe because of them. He's a friend, a brother in Christ, an inspiration, and someone I've had the privilege to mentor as an intentional disciple whose personal witness is not only jaw-dropping, but undeniably reveals the reality of the dignity and integrity of every human life, from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. Dustin Bertrand is a dynamic speaker, a youth minister, and evangelist. He has a degree in psychology and a minor in criminal justice, and is currently working on his master's in theology and Christian ministry through an online program at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Ohio. He entered a Catholic Christian seminary for a semester before discerning his way out and serving in the role of a lay minister in the Catholic Church. He has spoken at multiple universities, schools, and churches, and is the founder and CEO of God-Made Self-Driven Ministries. And he recently wrote and published his own autobiography, The First 30, A Journey of Grace, that I just finished reading. Dustin, it's been an honor to be your friend and to grow in a relationship with God with you, and I'm happy you're here today. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, my man. I appreciate it, Chad. It's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this podcast. And that was such a beautiful opening piece. It's funny, the Holy Spirit is already working because a lot of the things you quote are some of my favorite verses in the Bible. So I'm really excited to see what He has in store for this podcast.
Well, God works in funny ways, man. And when I first met you, I'd say a little over, about 1.5 years, 2 years now, we've been kind of walking together,
Yeah.
and I encountered your story. And if people that have listened to some of my podcasts know, I've kind of alluded to my journey with my son Eli.
Yeah,
And I was a pro-life speaker for a long time, and I kind of figured that I needed to kind of redirect this because I found that the testimony about our journey with Eli is one about redemptive suffering. And you certainly have had a lot of redemptive suffering in your life. And then after our relationship grew and we've worked together in a couple of different ministry capacities, I discovered you wrote a book. And I just got through reading it. And I know a lot of people who are listening to this podcast may be familiar with your story, but I'm pretty sure that there'll be quite a few who aren't as familiar with it. And if you would just take a few minutes and kind of share a little piece, a synopsis of your testimony, so that the listeners who are listening that never heard about your story can get a better feel for who you are. Can you do that?
Yes, definitely. So, the book is called The First 30, A Journey of Grace. And it's pretty much the journey of, I guess, my testimony and how I've kind of walked into this ministry that I have. And so it started out, I guess you can really say, in 2013 when I started to discern the priesthood in college. It was around 2011 when a religion teacher, Miss Reba Broussard, I would always confide in her with all my personal, issues and whatnot. And she would say, you ever thought about being a priest? And I told her, definitely not. and I told her I always saw myself as, a father and hopefully one day a husband and all that good stuff. And she was like, well, the way you process and discern things, I think you should be open to the priesthood. Well, I didn't leave college. I graduated in 2012. But the summer of 2013, I kind of hit like an impasse, a crossroads. And as I was praying about what I should do, I wanted to be a professional golfer. I always thought that was going to be the talent that I was going to use to impact people and change lives. It was one Sunday, I actually was going to miss Mass to go play basketball, but obviously I didn't. So as I'm getting to Mass and I'm walking through the doors, I see my old religion teacher show up. She's like, how you been? How you doing? I said, I'm pretty good. And I can kind of see that look in her eyes. She was like, are you going to the priesthood or what you going to do? But we didn't talk about it. I just walked into church. It was a regular Sunday. I wasn't, sad or overly excited to be there. Unfortunately, that's where I was in my faith walk. And I get there and, the homily comes on, and the homily is all about praying for future priests, the priesthood, the seminarians, praying for their journey and their discernment. And I'm just staring at the priest. I'm like, man, are you trying to tell me something here? And I was fine throughout the whole homily. I kind of was getting this conviction inside that he may be speaking to me, but it wasn't until after some music came on and we got closer to receive the Eucharist. And as the song started playing, I don't know what happened. I started feeling warm and I just started crying, shaking. And in fact, one of my brother's ex-girlfriends were behind me, and she like tapped me. She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm fine. I don't know what's going on." And I felt that he was saying, "Look, you know what you have to do." And I was like so scared. And so I kind of got myself together. But then once I started walking down the aisle to receive Jesus, by the time I received it in my hand, my face was full of tears again. And I knew from that day, moving forward, that I had to go into the seminary and discern the Catholic priesthood. And it was in that time, 2013, where I did a lot of healing and figuring out about who I was and who my true father was. Because amongst entering the seminary in 2013, in 2000, I think it was around 10, 11, I found out that the reason I didn't know my biological father, the reason I grew up with just having my mom for the first 6 years and my stepdad the following year, so I was about 20, was because my mom unfortunately was raped, and I was conceived by rape. And I found that out right before my 20th birthday in 2000, I think 10, 11. I'm not really good at math. And so going into the seminary at that time, I brought all those questions and all those wounds into the seminary as I was discerning the Catholic priesthood. And I did a lot of healing there.
And I've heard you give the testimony about what happened to your mom and how you kind of act, the way you present it, you share it as almost through her eyes.
Yes.
What she endured, and then what happened, the decision she had to make, and kind of being ostracized in the community for making that decision. And then the beautiful idea that she was going to preserve life no matter what. And then at the end, you kind of conclude by revealing to everybody that you were the son who she chose to have, which is just a beautiful way to put the nail on the head. And, I was thinking about, as I was preparing for the interview with you, when I would do a lot of pro-life stuff with Eli's story and I go around the country, I'd hear a lot of people, and you still hear this argument today, from people that are pro-choice. They want abortion to be legal, they want it to be safe, and they want it to be rare. And that's kind of gone away. It's gotten a lot more radical at this point. But in the past, they would say that, there always has to be exceptions. And I even hear pro-life people, quote unquote pro-life people, claiming that there must be an exception. And they say that the exception must be in the instance of someone being raped, for incest between, two people that should not have engaged in a conjugal act, for paternal reasons or maternal reasons, and then the health of the mother, which is a very ambiguous statement. But what they do is, it's kind of strategic. They paint that as the norm, even though it's really just an exception.
Correct.
So that if somebody takes a stand for life, and they're going to say, even in these instances, you should preserve life, they paint them to be an extremist, by painting the fact that this is something that's normal when it's just the opposite. It's just a very extreme circumstance. Less than 1% of the annual abortions that occur, and there are quite a few in this country, are related to those three instances. And I was reading through your book, and I came across this question, so I want to hear you talk about it. And it was a quote I took away from it. It said, is grace truly enough for life's challenges? And then you followed up with, if one was created from an evil act, can one ascend to goodness? And I was having a conversation one morning with somebody I was working out with at Reds, and he had a similar experience with someone who he had to deal with who was conceived in rape, and it was a different outcome than yours. And when I confronted him with your story and with you, he got very uncomfortable. But it was beautiful because it made him stop and reconsider his own position on that. And I'm reading your book, and I can say with absolute certainty that you are a walking witness to the idea that God allows bad things to happen to bring about a greater good. So you said, nothing else in my life calmed the storm within me. Everything else seemed to distract or be an escape from my inner turmoil, unlike the truth of Jesus Christ. When I put to the test this promise of God about him being my father, peace and wisdom eventually followed, and it became the only consistent truth in my life. Is that something you figured out when you were at seminary, and that's propelled you to go out and begin giving the witness you give now?
Yes, I would say that was that was like the turning point for me, definitely. And it was definitely a process even from that point. But being in the seminary, you spend so much time in prayer and formation and discernment. This idea of God being Father, and really spending time in the quiet and looking back on your life and looking at it very objectively and trying to take your feelings out of it and just see things as they are, helped me tremendously. I realized that I kind of get teary-eyed even to this day. Looking back over my life, I really did have a father overseeing all my actions, even my mistakes. And like this little inner voice, when I'd make a mistake, I'd hear it. Why you did that, Dust? Or, when something bad would happen, this little bit of these words of encouragement, like this little inner voice, get back up. It's okay. Like I would wonder like where that internal, voice would come from, but as I grew in my faith and my relationship with Christ, I started understanding that, that's my Heavenly Father. I always would have this, Mom to this day doesn't understand, like I would put up these boundaries with certain people, and one being very close actually in my family at a very young age. And then years would come and evidence would be shown that I couldn't necessarily trust that person. And she was like, I don't know, even from a young age, you had this intuition to set boundaries with people that you couldn't trust, but I didn't even see that I couldn't trust these people. And so it's very humbling. And I really realized it when I went to a pro-life event, and it was kind of a secularized event. So they didn't want me to talk too much about God. And I couldn't even really share my story because so much of it entails him looking out for me, him going before me, and him being just all around every event of my life. So yeah, it was definitely there. 2013 in the seminary started my mature realization of him being my Heavenly Father.
What you say that, it kind of sparks a memory in my mind. I remember when I had written my first book, Waiting for Eli, I got asked to go and speak to some folks in a public secular setting about writing the book and telling the story. And I asked them, I said, listen, if I can go in there and I can talk about Jesus Christ and I can talk about God, I'll do it. If I can't, I'm not going to do it. And I admire you for walking into that venue and trying to do that, because I know how challenging it is, because I know for a fact that I cannot get up and give my story as a father and a man and a husband about Eli without talking about Jesus. That's just impossible, And, we started the show and I talked about fatherless homes and people growing up in that environment. And I talk about in some of the questions I kind of gave to you to kind of prepare for the interview, I asked you about people that were like your Simon of Cyrene. When we carry our cross, we always have somebody who comes behind us at just the right moment, right? And kind of helps us. And you listed a few men, and I don't want you to talk about all of them, but let's maybe talk about a few of those people. I'm going to pick John Listy because we both friends with John, and a lot of people in the community that may hear this might know him. How did John do that for you? And how did some of the other men you mentioned help father you when you're God fathered you through them? How did they do that for you?
Oh boy, catch me on an emotional day this morning. I don't know what's going on. John, man, he's just been like, I can't even explain it. Like just that father that would be in the stands, like losing his mind for you, like for his son, like. So loud, so like pushing, like so affirmative. Like his affirmations for me have been so huge, and the way he would push me to get the stuff out of me, like like the way he would grow me in my spiritual gifts have just been amazing. It was never like domineering or degrading. He just did it in such a unique way, just in such a loving way, and I don't know if that's the greatest. I guess that's the greatest word I can use. It was tough love, but it was just a soothing type of way in which he just brought these gifts out of me. So he's definitely been like a father figure, a big brother. Like I call him Uncle John. Even he's wore many hats for me, but he's somewhat of a type of dad that I hope to be one day. And I tell him that all the time. I said, hopefully I can give back. Maybe to your sons and your daughters, the things you've given to me, because I definitely couldn't be this far in ministry without him. I wouldn't even have met you, Chad, without him. I wouldn't have got to the point to be able to meet you and build our relationship and be mentored by you. He's just taught me, so many things in the spiritual world, and then he's taught me balance of ministry and family life, or the struggle of that, and he's been vulnerable with me and some of his weaknesses and things like that, and just showing that there's strength in vulnerability as a man, as a father, and as a spiritual leader. And so that's been a few ways. And another guy was Markeith Brown, and what was unique about him was he was my basketball coach my junior year, and he was the first African-American man to pull greatness out of me, to call me out of the back seat. I had a tendency in sports to just let other people succeed at the detriment of my ability, and maybe even let other people, walk on my character at the detriment of my character. And he really challenged me and taught me about the African-American culture. He used to, this is a funny thing, but any people in the African-American community that listen to this podcast, you understand, he would cut my hair before every basketball game. There's a certain way you got to cut, mix people's hair. It's pretty funny. And we have some funny stories with that. And he was the first African-American man to push me in my character and as a man on, in the secular world, I guess you can say, and drew things out of me and made me feel comfortable in my skin, and because I grew up in a white affluent home, but also I have this African-American, heritage in me, and innately it comes out. I gravitate. I like Zydeco dancing. There's certain type of foods I gravitate towards without even knowing it, and he just made me feel comfortable in my skin. And so he was huge, because he asked me a question when I was 17 years old. He said, "Who are you?" He said, "Who are you?" And I tried to answer. He said, "I don't want you to answer from. I don't want you to tell me. I want you to tell yourself. Who are you?" And it was in 2013 in the seminary when I called him one day, and I was able to tell him. I said, "Hey, I can answer that question now." And so that would be another Simon that had a strong impact on me.
That's beautiful. And when I'm hearing you witness to this about John and your coach, I see that over your journey, one of the things you discovered is that true fulfillment comes not from taking, but from giving, and to empty yourself out, not look within, but look out. Know who you are in every situation, but never make it about you, and always be willing to use your gifts and talents to serve the Lord and to reach out and assist others. And when I met you, I learned, you had this really great paraphernalia. I know you sell it around, and people are wearing it. In fact, I have a bunch of shirts now myself. My son is wearing the shirt I bought from you at that youth thing that Kyle Melanson, a youth minister and a young adult coordinator in one of the parishes in the diocese, had put on for young adults, and he's about wore it out. But can you kind of give everybody an idea? What is God Made Self Driven Ministries? What's its mission? How has it serviced the Acadiana area and assisted the Diocese of Lafayette to provide a needed service for many rural parishes who cannot afford the luxury of many of the parishes within the suburban confines of Lafayette? So talk a little bit about your ministry and what it does, and maybe tell people a little bit about the Spiritus Sanctus Conference and Love United.
Yeah. Okay. So God Made Self Driven. It's a nonprofit ministry. I guess you could say it's an answer to the new evangelization. I guess that would be the good church language to use. And then it's a platform for me to share the gospel, right? And also to defend pro-life in my personal story. And its mission, it's very simple. It's to awaken the laity's mission in the church, to call the laity to a higher standard of living in their spiritual life and in their family life. That it's not just for priests to be holy, that we're to be holy, right, as He is holy. And so we've been able to work in the Acadiana area with the Diocese of Lafayette in a couple of ways. And one of those ways is the Spiritus Sanctus Conference, which we're able to put on this conference with an amazing team. Also, being led by you as well, Chad Judice, John Listy, Kyle Melanson, these local youth ministers that have been in the field for 5 to 20 years, but also bring other outside evangelists from other dioceses to kind of share their story and their testament, and we help them encounter the Holy Spirit. We open it up from 9th graders to 11th graders, confirmation candidates, and we give them a full experience. We invite them to go deeper in their relationship with Christ through the power of the Holy Spirit. And so the first year we were able to bring in, I think, about eight churches, 8 different parishes, and we had about 150 kids. And then this recent year we brought in, I think, 12 to 15 parishes, and we had up to 230 kids from around South Louisiana. And it's been pretty awesome to see God's hand in it, and just to see God just bless it and impact the youth, and for it to keep growing. And hopefully, unfortunately, I guess you can say, COVID's kind of put a damper on our third year, but that's been one of the big things we've been able to work with the Diocese of Lafayette to provide to the rural parishes, the parishes that can't necessarily afford Chad Judice, a John Listy, a Kyle Melanson, and such youth ministers that it can be hired full time.
No, it's been a pleasure and a gift to be able to empty myself and work with you in the capacity of providing this need. I know the first year at the conference, I was able to get Bishop Desatel to celebrate the Mass. It was really awesome. Special. Yeah. It was very special. And then I was able to give my witness about Eli. And then last year, theology of the body is it's had a big influence on my life. Yeah. And last year I was able to go and give a witness about what you do doesn't define who you are and your personhood. And, that we need to have a renewed understanding of the nature of the human person, and that we're a gift to be given and received. And we're to love people and use things. But our culture today, unfortunately, perpetuates using people and loving things. And it was great. And I know this year it's kind of up in the air based on COVID, but I know that once we get back on track and we're going to get past this, we'll be able to offer it again at some point for a third time. And as soon as we can figure that out, we're gonna get that put together. I also got to witness you bring together people of different Christian backgrounds and faiths in the Lafayette area through Love United. So kind of give a little plug about that.
Yeah. So with the ministry's name being God Made Self Driven, it's a very I guess you can say welcoming name. I'm through and through, never gonna leave Catholic, but I found myself around people of other Christian denominations and whatnot, and so I was praying one day and asking the Lord, what do I do with this? How can I, is this a gift you've given me, or is this just my friend circle? What can come about from this? And we created this thing called Love United, and I contacted some local pastors from the Baptist churches, the non-denominational churches, the Catholic parishes, and we came together for one night. and it was like a night of unity, to not, ignore our differences, but to maybe bring some of those to the table, talk about, Jesus Christ, which is the center, and just show that even though we're different, doesn't mean we have to be enemies, right? Even though maybe our doctrine may be different, doesn't mean we have to, draw circles and fences around each other. That we can still have mature conversation, and that we can come together and hopefully one day have this one faith, this one body, and this one belief. And so that night was pretty phenomenal. I think it was 6 different pastors, and then 2 Catholic priests that were on this panel that all talked together and discussed different things, from relationships, from evangelization, to defending life, and so on. So we were hoping to have it this year again as well, but again, COVID has put a damper on a lot of these community events. So we're going to kind of sit back, discern, and pray, and see what God has in store for that in the future.
No, I think that's great, man. I think, one of the opportunities you have in that ministry is that these people do have truth in what they're teaching. It's just a partial truth. Yeah. And you have the ability to build that bridge with them and expose them to the fullness of truth. Amen. And call them home to the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church Jesus Christ founded, which is the Catholic Church.
Say it loud.
Yeah, say it loud, say it proud, right? And we should. We shouldn't be embarrassed to do that. Never be embarrassed about being Catholic or apologize for being Catholic. Doing some work with the Louisiana Right to Life was something I know you've also done. And I remember talking to you one time after one of the times you gave your personal witness. And I've noticed this too, as somebody who's worked in the pro-life movement. It's a woman's world. And, here we are. I'm a dad. I'm 42 years old. I'm getting up. And then you're this, 20, 30-something-year-old guy. And I remember you talking about the first time you witnessed this story to a room full of nothing but women. And you kind of gave me some feedback on what that was like. So you're a guy in a woman's world, but that doesn't mean that men should not have something to say about this issue. And they absolutely should be, because a lot of times these poor women are forced into going into a clinic to eradicate what they see to be as a problem, which is really a gift. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and to be in front of those women and be a man sharing the kind of story that you share?
Yeah, as and I'm sure you can, you just said you can relate to this. As a speaker and whatnot, or a retreat leader, you can go into a room and then you can kind of sense almost. I don't know if it's a spiritual thing or just an intuitive thing, but you can almost feel and sense the atmosphere. You can feel their energy and whatnot. And so this was in Abbeville. I think it was at in front of an Acts women's group in Abbeville, Louisiana. And so I went to share my story, and you could just, I don't know, they were so, I could almost feel their hearts. I could almost feel their love as mothers, or their loves as daughters. Like they were almost in the story just as much as I was. They can almost put themselves as my mom in the story, and it was surreal, because I could the air was getting heavy. I could sense their emotions so much, and the response was just amazing. They kind of echoed what you said. We never hear it from a man's point of view. We've never heard it. I haven't heard a pro-life message from a man's point of view like that in forever. And I was like, well, thank you. I couldn't really say much else than that, but you could just feel the hearts of the women so much more than when it was mixed or just men. Men are a little tougher. They can kind of they can understand the principle of what I'm saying, right? They're not going to show too much emotion, but these women's hearts were so into the story. I felt like they were my mom in that room at one time. The way their eyes were glued, and the way their emotion were so on their sleeve. And so I'll never forget that. And another thing that I can just share, like the young people. When I go to these, it's called Louisiana Right to Life. They're Pulse weekends. Seeing a room filled with kids that chose to go to these camps and are spending 2 or 3 days learning about pro-life, the arguments, the biological aspect, the philosophical aspect of that. When I first gave my first little testimony to one of these camps, I started tearing up. Like I said, because y'all are the greatest gift, for me, to just see so many hearts that are in the fight for someone like my mom and someone like myself who was in the womb. So those two are probably the most impactful, I guess, testimonies I've given for the audience has affected me, is what I'm trying to say.
That's a beautiful segue into what I want to go into next. And it's, first I was just thinking, you're talking about the women. In their nature, God designed them for motherhood.
Yeah.
And it's an innate thing and a natural thing that they can't really explain. It's just in them. I've noticed it when my wife was carrying our 3 children. And I think the most tragic thing in this contraceptive mentality that we've had, post 1960s, post Humanae Vitae from, St. Pope Paul VI, is that what they've done to women is they want to put them in the workplace and make sure that they can't get pregnant so they can be there and they can produce. And the irony of that is that you're taking a woman out of her own nature, her own design, you're turning her into a man. And that's why they struggle with it so much, because it's just so counterintuitive, but it's like this lie the culture has told us. And a lot of women, unfortunately, have bought into it. And a lot of men have bought into it too. And then with the kids, I mean, just talking about the love that you just spoke of so beautifully. I always say that love is a decision. It's not a feeling. And it's an act of the will. And it's to choose to will the good of the other as other over ourselves, no matter what it costs us. And that's a transforming kind of love. Amen. So in closing, could you kind of talk about how your cross and suffering transformed your personal understanding of love and the way you choose to love now, even in the face of obstacles in your ministry? I mean, look, I'm just going to throw this out there.
Yeah.
Everybody's a critic when you're doing ministry. And I think that's just universal in the church.
Absolutely.
And I think oftentimes we project onto other people the things we dislike most about ourselves, especially when we're insecure about them. And I know that I've had obstacles in my ministry. You've had obstacles in your ministry, but I just say, show up, do your thing, and let God silence your critics. And He usually does that. And He's done that with the way that you love and the way you do your ministry. So talk about your love and how it's been transformed. You said, when I asked you, true love hurts. I've come to realize that to give the greatest love, you must be willing to endure great things, and that your cross has allowed you to live in the present and appreciate simple things in your life. True love does hurt, Love without suffering is a fairy tale, and suffering without love is unbearable.
You sure the movies don't say that? You sure that's not what I hear in my music? No, but absolutely. Like, that's one thing I've come to realize, true love does hurt. And I've had to learn that the hard way. And I think most of us, for me, I learn better when it's hard, because I don't want to go through it again, or I want to do better, and I want to do it the right way. But it has like the crosses and the sufferings have slowed me down so much, and it's allowed me to see things, I think, sometimes, or hopefully most of the time, in the way in which God would see it, right? And so I'm able to like you were saying, in ministry, in my journey with ministry, I've had to mature over the last 3 or 4 years, and I had an incident, I think this year, in the beginning of this year, where I went and gave a presentation, and I got some hard criticism that I wasn't worth the financial. I guess I wasn't worth my salt. I wasn't worth what they gave me, and that He wouldn't hire me again. And if I'm going to do ministry, I don't know how this person didn't understand how I was going to do ministry for the rest of my life, and things like that. That things needed to get better, and it really hurt. This was a leader. This was someone that has spiritual authority and that I look up to, and so instead of getting bitter, though, the cross and the suffering that I've learned and that Christ has displayed for me, I was able to turn it into a positive. And even though it hurt my feelings, hurt my pride, and really hurt my heart, because I tried to give Him everything I had, and I got good feedback from the parishioners in the parish and the people that attended the presentation. But I was able to look at it, take it for what it was, and have a mature conversation with this person, and improve, hopefully in the future, my preparation, my understanding of being prepared, And I was able to love that person where they were at without criticizing him or saying he was wrong or not wrong, all that good stuff. I was able I kind of went back to when Jesus was being interviewed before he was, put on the cross, and how he was very silent and a man of very few words, and they were punching him and they were like, well, tell us who hit you. Tell us who hit you. And he just kind of just took it on the chin. And then he went out and did something great with his life. And so the love that Jesus showed me, and my crosses and my suffering were able for me to just kind of take it on the chin, and then now hopefully go do something great with my life. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just allowed me to not take things so personal and to use it for growth.
No, and I think I want to affirm you. I mean, we're friends, which I don't have a problem doing, but I think you show some great humility. And humility is conformity to the truth. That's what St. Thomas Aquinas says in the Summa. And for me, humility is knowing who you are in every given situation, but never making it about you. And I think, a lot of times we do get criticized, and, there's a little truth in everything.
Absolutely.
So it's always good to but it takes humility to say, okay, I'm going to absorb that. I'm going to re-examine it, and I'm going to do better. And I believe the Lord is going to anoint you, and I've seen you do a lot of things, and I've been very impressed. I remember when I watched you give the testimony about your story the first year at Spiritus Sanctus, I was crying. Obviously, it's very, very close to my heart because my son, 80% of people who get the diagnosis we did abort their baby. And I just had this connection with you through my son. And it's been awesome to watch you grow and to be a person who's had a chance to help form you. And I promote you every time I talk to somebody that's looking for a good young person who's got a great ministry going, that wants to share his life with other people and to show how God took him from the depths of what people would say is the greatest tragedy and turn it into what I perceive, and I believe everybody who hears you speak will see, is a triumph. I love you, man, and I appreciate you being on the show today. It's been really great having you, and thank you for your humility, your vulnerability, in sharing your suffering and how you've allowed Christ to work in that. As you just stated very boldly, for your own benefit, but more importantly, for the benefit of others. If you are in need of the laity and the diocese to step up and do things in a parish or in a ministerial sense, I want you to reach out to Dustin. Get a copy of his book. It's really worth the read.
Definitely.
Invite him to share his testimony, and check out his organization at godmadeselfdriven.org. If you enjoyed the program and this story, share this podcast, give it a rating, leave a comment. And if you'd like to invite me or anyone else that you know in the diocese who's a great speaker to speak in an event, please do that. Pick up a copy of my books, shoot me a message on social media, or go to my website, chadjudice.com. And remember, all proceeds from my writing and speaking go to fund my son Eli's lifelong medical expenses. Remember, we must boast most gladly in our weaknesses, so that the strength of Christ that might be with us. For when we're weak, that's when we're really strong. And it always takes a Good Friday to leave behind who the world says we should be, in order to rise with Jesus Christ on Easter Sunday as the person he created us to be, a saint. Until next time, God love you.
In a world that says give up, I did not yield. I gave my all for your battlefield.